Hi riders, here I am with hot impressions from the ride on the hot new Kingsong S20, so look forward to my fiery conclusions. In the first part we will roast Eagle in the light trial test. In the second part we will react to the fair-baked Kingsong within 3 weeks. And in the last part we will slightly fry the topic of suspension. Thanks to the boys from Ekolka, we had an opportunity to test new S20 wheels on a big spring ride in Prague. We had 2 test wheels available, so my first impressions are based on 2 about 5-minute rides on each of them. It must be said that these are pre-production wheels, so we can expect some adjustments and improvements to the production ones. Boys are also experimenting with non-genuine pads and shock absorbers, one with spring suspension and the other with air suspension. After 10 minutes spent with S20, I can't even consider this video as a comprehensive test. It's just my first impressions and one of the test scenarios, which in my case was a ride in light terrain to a noticeable but not extreme hail. Because the acoustic track that captures the sound of the wheel is the important for my review, I will stop talking for a moment. The wheel makes 2 types of sounds. The first belongs to the suspension mechanism. For riders accustomed to calm flow over terrain, this sound is already a relatively disturbing element. If I had no experience with a fully sprung mountain bike, I would say that this sound is a tax paid for having suspension. But I don't hear such sounds on my bike, so I don't consider such a rattle to be something that would be easy to reconcile to. The second sound is something I would call a suffering engine. This sound is even more annoying and quite repulsive for a quiet ride through the woods. The combination of both sounds then significantly spoils the driving experience. Another aspect that raises high expectations is engine performance. Probably you have not missed the footage made by companies competing in which of their test riders will climb a steeper hill. If the wheel then meets the heavier rider, the moment of expectation is replaced by a moment of disappointment. We would see an adequate result if they put a backpack with a bag of cement on the back of a 60-kilo Asian man. Forgive me for leaving emotional words in the soundtrack, it best illustrates my first impressions.
Ještě to zjedu s monstrem, protože mám pocit, že tohle je mrtka, vole.
Cože?
Mám pocit, že to jsou mrtky.
Proč?
No, protože to hovno jede.
Hovno to jede? To já si netroufám to
These words were probably too strong. Unicycles didn't perform so badly. It is true that even I didn't have a high expectations, unlike the public. I still hoped that the unicycle, which presented itself as a terrain eater, would show a more convincing performance. The combination with sounds of suffering evoked in me these expressive expressions, for which I apologize mainly to the boys from Ekolka, who gave us the opportunity to be in touch with new top EUCs. To be able to compare performance in similar conditions, I decided to take the same route with the unicycle I had on the ride, the Monster Pro. Although the S20 has more ambitions to compare with the Big Old Master, while the Monster is more or less a road machine, I have decided that such comparison is better than none, and in the next few minutes I will complete this trial with the reference machine. I note that I have already completed the trial with the yellow S20 with a spring damper, but I didn't notice any major differences between these Kingsongs. Just as I was considering leaving my words at the top of the hill on this recording, when the desire for authenticity finally won, I also thought about the next shot for a while, whether to keep it or not, so I can't be accused of fact that I am a lazy rider. But also this time the effort to make the video informative won, because it also says a bit about the torque we can expect. I wouldn't blame Kingsong. A few weeks ago the same thing happened to me on Monster. Just on those few centimeters after the start the torque is not so big to overcome some obstacle. Let's ask what is behind the diametrically different results of performance tests compared to uploaded videos from the internet. Well, they probably don't address the right testers with the right test equipment. So before we move on to the comparative right, just let me say 2 remarks about what I like on the wheel and what I didn't like. I didn't like the location of the charging connectors. I don't envy future owners this G-point search. On the contrary, what I really liked is the use of smart battery management system. Kingsong is not the first, Ninebot had it in the past too, but it is a step in the right direction, and I hope that in the future every wheel, or at least the premium ones, will be equipped with it. In conjunction with surveillance software, for example, this option is already integrated into UC World. User can monitor the status of cells and possibly save the battery and its surroundings from fire. There are some indications that this BMS is not yet without flaws in all respects in terms of monitoring on conditions, but also the existing possibility to control over application is a big step forward. So let's compare S20 and Monster on the same trail. Due to possibility of comparison of sounds produced by its rival, audio tracks of Monster will be selected now. The Big-Out Master, which would be also interesting to test, is not available for us at the moment, so at least we will do a comparison with a primarily road unicycle. The Monster has a 200 watts more powerful engine, however the S20 is considered as an off-road wheel and the smaller wheel radius should be an advantage in hill climbing. The test of course can be affected by the fact that I have already driven a few kilometers on the Monster, while on the S20 it were my first 2 rides. But Monster Pro is also mostly a holiday affair for me so far because due to the insufficient water resistance I am not going to any major events with it until I seal it properly. So far I drive mostly the Monster V3. As you can probably hear, the Monster, unlike the S20 Rattlesnake, floats silently through the terrain. I don't think that I would drive the S20 particularly consciously more slowly than I did on the Monster, but it's possible that I was listening to some signs of the wheel more than following the purely forward direction. Nevertheless, I think that the test as a whole corresponds to the sovereignty of the wheels. Although the difference was not big, Monster was more convincing and didn't show that it didn't like the ride. On this easy trail, I didn't recognize any difference in comfort, even one unicycle was sprung and other was not. The big Monster wheel was able to reliably iron these unevenness, so I didn't feel less comfortable. I will mention suspension in general in the third part of this video. Originally, I didn't plan to mention unicycle fires in this review, but with the third Kingsong burned within 3 weeks, a few words on this subject will be appropriate. The first 2 cases were S18s. Let's get rid of similar 10s as Big-Out got, partially rightly. The circumstances in which fires occurred must be taken into account. In one of these cases, the unicycle went through a cleansing bath in the past, which probably contributed to the fire. The companies Emotion and Kingsong, after many years of looking at the backs of the Big-Out's unicycles, started to step on the heels of these faster wheels. However, rather on paper, because they now face problems they previously didn't have to face with their slower and more conservative products, so they have not yet successfully entered this segment. With the advent of higher speeds and performance, other producers began to compete Big-Out also with a variety of problems, ranging from Emotion V12 electronics errors to the S20 fire of recent days. With increasing performance, various speed demons overloaded their wheels and checked the quality more than they liked. Until now, mainly Bigoud's EUCs were facing such abuse, which is also reflected in the occasional fatal failures. The S20 fire most likely belongs to the category of those when the rider's limit behavior triggered a sequence of events leading to the fire. However, according to his statement, the rider behaved similarly to the S20 as to his Bigoud wheels, which withstood similar behavior, so this is no excuse for burning. A stop sign for S20 was acceleration and braking repeated at short intervals. According to the driver and sounds, this led to the destruction of the capacitors. Logically, it would sound more like destruction of power elements, MOSFETs, but it's true that when a similar thing happened to me due to a blocked wheel on my MSX, from my historical photos I can also deduce the destruction of these capacitors. How the MOSFETs are is not clear from the photo because they are situated on the opposite side of the board. Unlike the Bigoud wheels, which usually burns only the board in case of an overload, this didn't only happen but the battery was destroyed. This is one direction I would take in Kingsong. Why didn't the protection work? I used to notice fuse protection circuits in Kingsong wheels. I assume a similar circuit in S20. Furthermore, the developers will likely go in the direction of simulating similar riders' behavior. It will be presumably impossible to find out anything from the unicycle in this state. Statistics logging was not turned on. Although Kingsong came up with an apology letter, which considers that fire is caused by a software bug, I can't imagine that. By the way, it's funny to observe some comments of Facebook debaters as this letter of apology is unique and such behavior is serious unlike other companies. Few people know that the Bigoud company was the first one who came up with this for the first time after a series of fireworks, including a typical Chinese stamp with a red star. More important than any letter, however, is if it will be fulfilled. Unfortunately, in the case of my Monster Pro, I have doubt about it, because the badge that came 2 months after this apology letter was still everything but waterproof, which makes me angry because it will cost me a lot of time to seal it to be able to go on a long trip without any worries of a rain. So I wonder how Kingsong will manage it. You will not grieve anybody with a promise. Suspension, this is an area where the S20 should be like a fish in the water, just thanks to its quite impressive 130mm stroke. And some skillful jumpers confirm it. Float trails and various jumps provide a lot of fun. Obviously it works and I wish you all it must be a nice hobby. Personally, I will exclude myself from this fun. I don't think that for a 100 kilos plus rider like me, there is some existing unicycle that can handle it for a long time. In connection with the possibility of damaging the battery and other elements, if I will desire more after jumping, I will probably choose another vehicle from my collection. After all, the mountain bike is more likely to withstand that load. But skilled thin wheelers go ahead. When it comes to suspension, this can be sometimes counterproductive if, for example, we risk rubbing the pedals off the ground. Another case where it sometimes is better to be without suspension is a climb where the machine can lose part of its power if it springs too much. That is why cyclists sometimes lock the suspension. Today there are popular videos of descending stairs with sprung unicycles. When you look at this Monster Pro, you will understand why I said on the test trail that I didn't experience less comfort than on the sprung one. So if it was a bit of overstatement while standing, then if you add a soft seat to the big wheel, as I have with my Monster V3, then it's no longer an overstatement. I call the seat a wild bison. By putting virtually no weight on your feet and driving your body tilts, this is the most gentle way I know. In the future, I do not oppose the possibility of combination with a sprung EUC, but already this way of driving is satisfying for me. I see the biggest benefit of the suspension in avoiding a possible accident at a higher speed when you get into a pothole in the road. I still don't trust the current unicycles in this direction yet, but I believe that I will be convinced one day. I wish you, the current or future Eagles, that it flies and doesn't bend too much.